this video, I'm going to help you get familiar with the Zoom interface. So we'll start at the top left, and you can see the little shield there, and that just lets you know that you're being encrypted, that the information is secure using Zoom's encryption. And then right here in the meeting information, this I find really handy. Couple things. One, there's a security piece here. It lets you know how you're connected, that your data is getting funneled through network centers, data centers in the United States, not through another country. And then this is super handy. I can copy the link to this particular meeting and send it to someone who may have problems getting access to the meeting. You also have the meeting ID that someone could plug in at zoom.us, and then they could go to join meeting and they could pop that in. Okay, the more important stuff here at the bottom, you can see I'm muted and my video is started. So we want to practice with these, just muting and unmuting, but probably more important, or just as important, is selecting our audio source. So at the beginning of every meeting, I like to click on this little, it's called a caret, and make sure that my microphone is set to my desktop microphone. I'm using this ATR USB microphone, and that my speaker is the correct speaker. So if you're not able to hear students, one of the things to check is to see if for your speaker, if you accidentally have defaulted, or your system has defaulted to your microphone, because of course that's not a speaker, but I've had that happen to me on multiple occasions. Same thing with the video. When you click here and you go to the video settings, it's going to bring up almost all of your Zoom settings. So hello. And here you'll be able to choose the camera. If you have like a desktop camera that's sitting on top of a large monitor, one of the things I recommend is like a 32-inch monitor, so you have more real estate on the screen. It's good. You'll probably need to have a USB webcam, and you'll need to be able to select that from the choices. So if you're working from a laptop, then you'll need to select that remote camera. So it has this little touch up your appearance thing. So it makes me not look as old, and I kind of like that. And you'll find a lot of more detailed things, settings here in the left-hand sidebar. And we'll get to some of those in a moment. Okay, so just know how to mute yourself, unmute yourself. I like to know how to start my video and stop my video, especially if we're going to be taking breaks as a class. I like to go to this during breaks, and it's nice. It's a visual cue to let your students know, hey, we're on break or we're not. And usually this picture would be a picture of me, but I didn't think you wanted to look at me for the entire tutorial. Okay, security. This lets you know that your participants are what they're allowed to do. I could say, you know what, I don't want my participants to be able to screen share because maybe they could interrupt the meeting with screen share. But right now I have all of mine selected. I don't like allowing my students to rename themselves unless they're in like group presentations. Then that's where I might want them to rename themselves. I might want them to be able to say, I'm in group A. During a debate, that's really great too, those kinds of activities. Okay. Enable meeting room and locking the meeting are two other security features. So you could lock the meeting once it begins. You could lock it, nobody else gets in. The problem with that is if you have a student who wants to get in, they can't. And they may be trying to email you or another student to be able to let in. Enabling waiting room puts them in basically a holding tank, and then you can permit them to come into the room individually, I believe through the participants list. So let's go to that. If we expand to the participants list, I'm going to move my screen over here. Resize it. Really important to get familiar with being able to mute, unmute particular students. So I would mute myself, unmute myself, or mute myself. I can also, I think, have control over turn cameras on and off there. I don't use most of these buttons down here. I don't instruct my students to use those because they're too, it's cognitive overload for me. They're small. People telling me to go faster and slower, I can get that feedback a different way. But there's that stuff too. And then you'll be able to see all your participants here. This is where you'd be able to block individuals from the meeting, that kind of thing. So get familiar with that. All right, let's see here. Chat. You'll notice I have file transfer enabled. To do that, that usually is default off. To access your settings, the more detailed settings, you'll click one of these carets here, and you go to the audio settings. It's going to open up the more detailed settings. If I go to chat, you'll notice that the file, being able to do the file transfer, is not enabled by default. And if I want to do that, I'm going to have to go to kind of the more detailed settings. So I think if I go under General and I click on View More Settings, that's going to open up a web browser that's going to have all my meeting settings in it. So I'll move this out of the way here. I'm just going to jump in here for a moment. And you'll see under Basic Meeting Settings, if it takes me to chat, I can turn file transfer on and off right here and make that available in my meetings. This is where you'll find at your account, if you go to zoom.us, you log in and then go to your account and then meeting settings, you'll be able to get all those more detailed settings. Some of those will be locked possibly by your institution for security reasons. And so if you're not able to control some of those, that's why. Okay, next piece here. Oh, within the chat, really important to know who you're chatting to. So you'll have a drop down here. Right now it just says to everyone because I'm the only one in here. But I'll have a drop down if I need to message a specific student. And that's really important if I want to keep something private. So really pay attention to that because you can inadvertently send a message to everyone that you intended for one specific student or vice versa. All right, now we're going to, I like to get this out of the way here. So let's see if I turn, I'm going to close this. That way I can maximize my screen. Yeah, I usually don't like when I'm teaching to have the participants list on the right, but I also need to let the students know that I'm not going to use the raised hand feature that I would normally see in the participants list. So if a student were to raise their hand using that little thing, it would come up beside their name over here. But again, I find that to be too small and too much for me to attend to during the session. So I like to actually use reactions instead because they overlay over top of the student's thumbnail. So there's just two right now. And so I might say, hey, I'm going to use this clap. I'd like you all, if you want to raise your hand, just click on this and see how it's at the top left of my screen there. On the student's thumbnail, it'll do that, and it's way more noticeable. And so that's what I recommend. But you have to level set that expectation with your students and let them know that's how you're going to use it. Okay, screen share, maybe one of the most important features to learn how to use. If I click on this, I'm going to get a lot of options. My full desktop. And so I usually don't use my full desktop because it's a lot of times too much information. And if I have a program that's on and pops up that I forgot about, then that could be broadcast to my students. So I like to pick specific things that I'm going to share. So I'm going to share a PDF in preview of teaching with Zoom. At least that's what I thought I was selecting. Yes, I am. Let's bring that here into the recording space. I'm using a screencasting software, so I'm working with Zoom and that at the same time. So when I'm in here, something to pay attention to, and I'm bringing my Zoom tools over so you can see them, is the annotation feature, which is kind of hidden. A lot of Zoom users I've talked to who have been using Zoom for a long time don't know about annotation, and it's a really cool tool, particularly to model for your students and for them to be using in breakout groups, like on collaborative documents and things. So if I click on annotate, and we won't go in detail on this one. In another video, I'll do that. But I find in meetings I use often this. Oh, where did it go? It's a stamp. This stamp arrow, and I'll make it really bright, like an orange, and then I can point out things to people and say right here, or right there. I don't know why that stamp is that color, but you should be able to change the different aspects of them. It likes blue for me for some reason. I can click text and I can type on the screen. And then there's like this mouse hover, which it's weird. I can't see it, but I think it looks like a little red dot on the student's end. Maybe that's a spotlight. Oh, yeah. So there's this one too you can use. And then there's this. This is the little red spot. You can highlight areas with your students or just draw. You can change the thickness of your line, stuff like that. So a ton of tools in here for annotation. And one of the final things to let you know is you can hit save, and then it saved that, and that'll pop up in the Finder, and I'll have a permanent record of that I can use. Okay, let's get out of Share, and we're going to go back into Share. And in Share, there's a whiteboard feature, which is pretty cool too. So a Zoom whiteboard, just a blank white document pops up that I can do all these annotations. Basically all the annotation features are here. So instead of annotating on a document, I'm just annotating on a blank screen, and I can save that as well. Your students will be able to have that feature in the breakout rooms. They can do screen share and whiteboarding as well, which makes for some great activities. All right, another thing, this becomes pretty important. In sharing, there's an advanced tab. We'll get into this in other tutorials, but sharing a portion of your screen allows you to select just one small area. So right now, if we are on the student end and I resize this green area, they would just see online teaching with Zoom. Or if I wanted them to see this area, they would see just this area. And that comes in handy in presenter view when you are using PowerPoint's presenter view to, with one screen, you can select just the slide that the student should see, and then they don't see all of your notes. But again, we'll get into that in another one, another tutorial. Okay, so share screen, get familiar with that. Recording, and where you record. If you're going to record to your computer or to the cloud, let's say we're recording, you'll see at the top left here, if your account's set to auto record, you'll always see this. So that's one of the things that's nice is if I'm recording, I always know that that is happening. I can pause my recording, I can resume it, and then I can stop it. After I stop it, if I've selected to save that on my computer, it will work in the background and it'll be available on my desktop in my files. If it's recorded to the cloud, it'll go inside of my recorded meetings area on my Zoom account. So I'd log into zoom.us, go to my Zoom account, and then inside my recordings. Okay, breakout rooms. This is a funny one because it's difficult to practice without having at least one other person inside of your Zoom meeting with you. But you can get a feel for how it works. Like I could say if I had 20 participants, I could put them in 3 rooms and it would break them up into say 6, 6, and 8. Or I can do that manually and it allow me to assign those. You can see here I've got these different breakout rooms. I could give those names if they had team names, and then I can assign different students to them individually through like a drag and drop function. And I can reorganize them, and then I can launch them into their rooms. Pretty cool feature. But I'd recommend that you take some time with a colleague or some students who would volunteer before class for you to get used to that. It's actually really easy to manage once you get it kind of adjusted to once you practice it a few times. And then reactions, again, you got the clapping, you got the thumbs up. And I heard Zoom's developing some additional kind of icons for these in the future, but right now we're limited to those 2. The last thing that's super important to know is ending your meeting. And so you'll have one that allows you to leave the meeting. And the important thing to know here is that your students may remain in that meeting. And so that has some risk for different age groups. People are at different developmental levels. So you've got to know that when you hit leave meeting, it doesn't end it. This is the one that you want to default to. And I'm glad they put it in red, end meeting for all. That kicks everybody out when you leave. So that's the basic overview of the Zoom interface. And take some time. It's probably the best 20, 30 minutes that you can spend is just getting a sense of being proficient, knowing where things are, feeling oriented, because the more proficient and oriented you are, the more confident your students are going to feel in the experience.